All right. Welcome, everybody. We're super excited for today's session on how AI is reshaping the office of the CFO. We'll wait a minute or two as folks trickle in, but for everyone who's here in the chat, would love to hear where you're joining us from. And while we give folks a minute to get settled, Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah. I'm really excited for this, and I think one of the things we're really want to dig into today, in what we hope is a really interactive session. We want to hear from you. We want to engage with everyone, and so please don't be shy about asking questions, asking follow-ups. It's kind of like whatever's relevant for you. I think like this is kind of like our priority. So maybe Steven, I might take it over to you to start to give intros, and then I can give my intro on my side. And while we wait for everyone to trickle in, maybe I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. It's a pleasure to see everyone and looking forward to this. I love the global nature of where everyone's located right now. And so keep it coming where you're located. But my name is Steve Seperson. I'll share mine verbally, but I'm currently in New Jersey in the United States. I am the CFO of Yipit Data. As well as SpendHound, which is a subsidiary of ours. I've been with the company approaching my 3 years this June. Before I was with a company called Gerson Lerman Group, or GLG, and I spent a little over 7 years there, where I led a lot of parts of the finance organization, was treasurer of the organization as well, and then spent almost the first decade of my career in capital markets, investment banking, equity research. And once again, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Obviously, very timely for many of us. I said this to Craig when we first met. I feel like I can contribute as a panelist, but also feel like I can be an audience member because all this is changing so rapidly in front of us. And so really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, and I totally agree and echo that sentiment. I feel like when we were chatting, just like learning a lot from each other, and I fully expect we will from everyone here as well. But like Stephen, recovering investment banker, started my career at Goldman Sachs, went to the investing side, was investor at KKR, doing private equity investing. I've been at Aleph about 3 years at this point, and one of the things that I'm really excited to dig into with Steve is just like the way in which how we're interacting with AI and how those workflows are changing at various company sizes and stages, various like sizes of the finance team. And so I think one of the reasons why I'm really excited for this conversation is that, Aleph is more in like the 100 employee range, and Steven's sort of more like a multiple of that. And so I think between us, we should have the landscape pretty well covered as to like ways AI can sort of get embedded, can get used, can get leveraged across a variety of company sizes. So really excited for the conversation. And with that, I think we'll dive into the agenda. And there's really a few topics. I want to spend a minute on these agenda items just so everyone who's on the call can sort of see where we're going and hopefully start coming up with some good questions or good thoughts on like what you're seeing, great things that you guys are doing, questions about things that you want to learn more about, and get into a little bit of the mindset shift with AI. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about where AI is actually helping. We also want to spend some time on where the puck is going and what we think is coming right around the bend. And then wrapping just like what are some things we'll do about it. There's Q&A here at the end, but we're going to stop through Q&A throughout. So as you kind of put your questions in the chat, we're going to try to address them as they come in a way that already makes sense. Maybe right before we dive in, I want to give one moment for our sponsors. So Steven, obviously representing SpendHound, representing Aleph. Aleph is an AI native FP&A software tool aimed at being a single source of truth for your data wherever it lives. I think kind of the nice things about Aleph is that it also works really well embedding within Excel and Google Sheets. So for folks who use a lot of spreadsheet-based modeling, whether it's for ad hoc scenario planning, for reporting, or more like headcount planning, OpEx planning, it's the tool that I always wished I had, and I'm thrilled to get to use every day. Steven, do you want to spend a minute on SpendHound?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I'm the CFO of Yipit Data. We're about 750 employees globally, headquartered in New York. We're in the tech and information services space, and one of our subsidiaries, SpendHound, is a give to get, so a free tool where you can plug your ERP data in and get vendor management as well as benchmarking data through our experts that we have internally. And so it's great to be partnering with you on this, and excited to dive in.
Amazing. So I want to start with the mindset shift. I think like this has been one of the most interesting things to watch over really the last like 14, 15 months is I feel like, and I'm sure you probably felt the same way, Stephen. Like I feel like we're very like masochistic finance folks in a way of like, all of those late nights we're working, it's sort of like this earned insights and it's like sweat equity. And I feel like for the first time, the mindset has like finally started to shift of like, oh, there actually like are tools that can help. Maybe to frame it, I guess like how has your journey been going from like, you know, maybe skepticism to like intrigue to really, embracing AI.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I would say we're in like the first inning of this AI journey, but I feel like, whether you call it Groundhog's Day or not, I feel like that resets. And so whether you want to say it's a building block, and so if you think about really the past 12, 18 months, there was definitely skepticism of like, what is this? You hear about it. Then you start going into, Chat GPT, for example, you start asking a question. It's more of like working with you as a, an assistant type. And now it's obviously evolving, and people are at various different stages of their adoption, but there's so much capabilities that keep from yourself, from internal as well as external type of products out there, that is constantly changing how we think about various processes in the office of the CFO, but really organizationally. And so, as I said, I feel like we're in the early innings, and it's exciting. Um, but it's all building off foundational footprints that we can leverage, and how you think about leveraging to improve processes and systems, et cetera.
And I think, there's the personal element of this journey. There's also the team element of this journey. It's not just about kind of like, you as a finance leader embracing it. It's also like how do you inspire that same, mindset shift among team members. So Steve, maybe I'll ask you, but also for folks in the chat, like how are you managing this with your teams as well, not just you personally, but how do you help talk to someone who's been doing a lot in Excel for a decade, maybe they have their way of doing things. How do you help them bridge to embracing this sort of new tool?
Yeah, great question. I would say you have to address it head on. I would say historically, if I go kind of like meta theme, most companies, most roles, there's like an apprenticeship type model where you grow in a career, you've taken on more skills, et cetera, et cetera. And those that are, earlier in their career are kind of learning in that model. That's changing. You have the, mentor in a tool that you can challenge yourself. You can ask questions that you may not have felt comfortable asking a boss or someone even above you. And so the way that I am pushing the team is, it's not just the apprenticeship model. There are processes, and all of this is evolving so rapidly. We all need to know where our domain expertise is and challenge each other, challenge and share like wins. Understand, if you're doing something on accounts payable or accounts receivable to FP&A or treasury or tax, there's so many use cases within finance, we're broad. Compare notes. And so, just as an organization, it takes embracing that and running into the fear head on. And then, from like a team perspective, we added an OKR that, how do we embed AI into our processes to challenge us? And it's not, this is the answer. It's we're going to figure it out together. And we know what the building blocks we're working towards. And so, it really is running into that, and embracing it as an organization and also as a team.
Steve, I know you didn't mean to do this, but it reminded me our team came up with this kind of like AI prompting guide that I think is kind of like a great, kind of like thought exercise to start experimenting with what are the things you can do. Because yeah, it's not just like, can you ask it, you know, how to clean up an email. It's, build my reporting package. It's, this is my board deck. Can you review my 70-page board deck, including the PDFs, or like whatever the images for like number validation and consistency, and make sure that like all my numbers tick and tie across slides. And so I put it in the chat for folks who are curious. But I think one other mindset shift thing that's really interesting is I actually think there is still a way to harness that like earned sweat equity component of this, which is, AI is a new surface where information can happen and knowledge work can occur. Where I felt like it was really the spreadsheet was kind of like the first surface. I think for a lot of like more remote organizations, increasingly Slack is a second surface. And I think AI really is a third. And the way to go through your accelerated like 10-week banker training of like mastering Excel is you kind of have to set aside some time, whether it's, in your favorite kind of, LLM to try to do the same thing. The last thing though, and maybe this is a great segue into where AI is actually helping, is I at least feel that in our organization, Q1 was about that exploratory phase, about look at all these new things that we can do. And Q2, it's now starting to turn to ROI. It's starting to turn to like, what is going to be a production environment thing? You spend a quarter off on your vision quest, and what came out of it.
Yeah,
So,
no, couldn't agree more. And just to go back to the first when you sent the template and kind of example prompts, depending on where you or your organization or your team is on this journey, it's the, crawl, walk, run. You have to start somewhere. So start with whether it's an email. Start with, hey, we want to compare, make sure the numbers tick and tie in your close pack, etc. Your team will start feeling that, and then figure out new ways to unlock capabilities, and just really think broadly like what the art of the possible can be within your own domain and then an organization, and really challenge yourself. And so I would just, really take a step back to do that. To your second point, we're definitely in this, constant, you see it, you work on it, and now where's kind of the ROI and how do you think about that long term? It's very exciting. And we can get more into what are some of the areas that we've seen, whether it be like rising tech costs or efficiency gains, et cetera, et cetera. To me, when you think about AI, it's like, is AI accelerating your top line? Are you getting efficiency gains on the bottom line? Is it both? And so it's very easy to say, oh, it's going to be an efficiency gain. We need less headcount. But really, I think about it as more of like output productivity. We're an ARR type business. And so when you think about it, business could accelerate. It could not be an accelerate for your top line, but is the team able to do more? Is the team able to think about how they're doing their processes, how they're getting more efficient, how they're then scaling the company as the company is growing? You may have had a redundant process that has now been automated through the use of AI. And that to me is like more from like an output productivity is where you're going to see it. And then obviously the costs that come with that. And so we can chat further, but very much in this, whether we're still in inning one or shifting towards kind of innings 2 or 3, starting again in those conversations.
Yeah, I think, as I reflect on our kind of like on the business side of Aleph, like not in our product, but internally, how we're using it, I would say that the two areas where I'm seeing the most ROI of like production environment AI today, I think one is in this category of connecting the dots.
Mm-hmm.
It's this kind of like, whether it's on your go-to-market team, maybe there's like a new, AE or like sales rep that joined the org that's working a deal where there was some past context that somebody else on the team had. Maybe it's your kind of like marketing and outreach team trying to learn more about existing customers and their use cases. AI has been a really great way of connecting those dots and giving everyone at the tip of their fingers access to information where there were barriers of you have to ask someone and they're busy and you have to wait for the response and you're worried about bothering them. So I think that like, connecting the dots, we've done really well. But to your point, that requires a mindset shift because that's like that's not pushing, that's a pull. So I think like that kind of is one element. I would say like the second element where we're seeing just like a ton of uplift is all of these like last mile delivery of tedious manual tasks. And for myself in particular, that is where Claude Cowork, not chat, but Cowork, has been massive.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really in the last 6 weeks. And I'm happy to like go into more detail on that, but Steve, like, would love to hear a little bit from you, and then yeah, like anyone in the chat, I want to learn too. So if you guys are kind of like using any of these things in great ways that we aren't, I want to hear about it.
Yeah, I would say on your first point, bottleneck of producing information should not be long term, medium term, the bottleneck. It should be, how are you making decisions? What judgment do you have to make that decision and informing those? When you think about the journey, all of those decisions still result in having a strong data architecture and data lake that feed that. And so whether it's a CRM and you're thinking about it from a go-to-market perspective, or just data ingestion from the ERP side, or other data sources that are relevant to your business, it all needs to come from that singular source of truth, quote unquote. But that should no longer be the bottleneck of having to produce that information. That should become table stakes. And then it's, how do you interpret, how do you drive decisions and use the judgment to make business decisions accordingly? And so that's definitely where I see the puck going, and how I continuously see this evolving. And then, as you mentioned, things are new. 6 weeks in Cowork, things are being published daily. Things are changing rapidly, and so don't just assume you're in Chat GPT and that's the art of possible and that's it. It's like, really open your horizons of what tools are out there, because one tool might be good in one workflow or process and another might be there. We've been developing internally our own agents, and so like the organization has really embraced that. And we're monitoring like our daily active users on it, and like how different use cases are prevalent for finance or people or go to market. And so really embracing what that tool is going to be. But there are many out there, and there will continuous evolution of how this evolves. And I would just say, keep that open mind to push you and your team.
Yeah, I think that's like another great example of connecting the dots of like data that lives in one system and is like, and also another great point, as distinct from being like the system of record. I'm open to the idea, and I'll be curious if anyone is using like AI as like system of record for one workflow or another. But I think our experience has been very much like, we're not vibe coding our Stripe replacement, but we are leveraging like Claude Cowork to help context switch and let someone from like inside of a Slack conversation directly update Stripe without having to go into the the interface and the dashboard, and you have to like manually do it. You can just like bulk execute 30, 50 tasks. You can have an agent that's reviewing for potential discrepancies between what one system thinks and another. So it's a lot more of that kind of like connecting the dots element as well. There's a question from Maxime, Steve. Curious to hear how you built your finance AI agents. Which tools did you use and where do you host them?
Yeah, so we are on this journey, and so I would say, built past tense, like we are actively building a lot of these things real time. One of the things we will likely get to is like how you think about governance of this and where you want your data to live, and how readily accessible. Which do you want your ERP data accessible to which users broadly? And so we've developed a lot of things internally, and so we're leveraging our internal application platform in order to build a lot of these agents within the finance organization. And then that's, using a lot of our spend, whether it's, through OpenAI, cloud cost, et cetera, et cetera. But, the more users that keep pushing on this, we've seen a very large increase in our cost spend as it relates to kind of the infrastructure of this. And so that's another thing we should chat through. And I'm curious if anyone here has been seeing their kind of rising tech spend as a result. It's really positive, but that's obviously something that we've been thinking about as well.
Yeah, Steven, I want to spend a whole like 15 minutes on spend on all of this. as part of like where the puck is going next. But yeah, Maxime, I think like on where and how we build our finance AI agents. So first we have it's maybe this is different across orgs. In our case, it's really our RevOps team has been like the AI czars who are really tasked with building things across platforms. One of the things that we did that I think was just one of like smartest operational decisions we ever did is we actually took one of our like early employees who is a full-time full stack software engineer and brought him to full time on the like RevOps go to market side, really like someone who has like, real software engineering experience governing and maintaining a lot of the agents and workflows that we use. Um, Now, I would say with like Claude Cowork in particular and with skills, that has been like the like power law function of now I can use Claude to create a skill that does what I want it to accomplish. And this is like very wide ranging, and I can go into examples, but there's like many. Um, Once I have a skill that I like, I pass that MD file to our RevOps team who puts it into production. And that way now, like, for example, one of the tools I built was like an MSA reviewer, because I also run our like legal function. Now I pass that to our RevOps team. They basically set it up in Slack so that every AE, when they get red lines on an MSA, they can call the skill I built directly inside Slack so that when our legal team is ready to review that file, the proposed AI red line and like all of the issues list is already kind of like set up and pre-built for them. And there's even a way if it's like easy auto accept, it just reduces a lot of that friction. So I think like Slack is our primary collaborative surface where we interact with it. And N8N is kind of the thing that facilitates the skills getting into Slack for us. But that's kind of how we do that setup on the left side.
Yeah, I would just
There's a
say
question.
you
Go
talked
ahead.
about
Yeah.
MSAs and whatnot. There's like, excuse me, there's companies, that are out there that are building, platforms that you could leverage, whether it be a Harvey or Lagora and all that. You could think about doing things yourself. And so this evolvement of companies are building platforms and tools to optimize for certain workflows or processes. It'll be interesting to see, do you build things yourself internally? Do you start leveraging outside tools? It's probably a combination of both, is where the puck will likely head to. And so, when you think about building these type of finance agents or legal agents or engineering agents or product agents or RevOps agents, they're all going to come from, building the right data infrastructure, making sure that when we started, it's producing the right information in a cohesive, and then it's driving the right decisions across to empower the organization.
Yeah. And going back to your original point, I would say like a lot of the priority is agents that can take something and perform some task, but it doesn't have to remember the output of the task. Like I would not have trusted, like if I needed a database that stored all the results, I would not trust myself to accidentally, delete the database, or like change the schema in a way that like makes it unreadable or something. Yeah, and Rich, I think going back to an earlier point you mentioned, Claude Cowork makes building reliable, repeatable, and autonomous actions, just so easy. And I think the daily delivery of pipeline and forecasting indicators. It's like Claude Cowork is like one of those things that you use it once, use a little bit more, use a little bit more, and it's like very easy to get hooked, which Steve, relates to the point that you just brought up on spend and on cost. I can tell you that we just closed our April books, and I can tell you that our total AI spend across OpenAI, Anthropic, and then there's kind of like a long tail of like Replit, Cursor, some of these other tools, tripled from February. So with the good comes the bad, and it's just like totally insane. So let's talk about the cost side. How are you guys approaching this problem? What are some of the things you're thinking about, and how do you articulate this value proposition in such an uncertain time?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear we're not alone. We're also seeing rising tech spend. I'm sure many are. There's the one side of like all you want to do is like optimize the cost, can make sure you're becoming profitable, operating leverage, all the things that come with that. But when you boil it down to, it's like, well, why? Why is it going? And so, what's the benefit? It's not a bad thing that your tech costs rise, even if you're seeing the business gets less profitable as a percent of revenue in that one isolated spend. If there's another, as we talked about earlier, like an ROI, what's the benefit that's coming from it? Is it efficiencies across the business, an accelerated product roadmap? You're seeing your top line growing. And so while your tech spend is growing, you're seeing faster product, go to, adoption, launches, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, as we think about tech spend as like, we're embracing it. It's one of those things, especially as a data organization, tech and information services business, it's the lifeblood of what we do. And so for us, as we embrace it, it doesn't mean that it's not something we are monitoring and trying to understand and really start getting more into the root drivers of, as more users in an organization adopt either an internal tool or other tools. How does that correlate to your internal tech spend? And so we're definitely pulse on it, but it can get a negative narrative. And, right now, it's very much a positive within our organization. Some point we will have to make sure, and, like it was when cloud, spend started ramping up, back in the day, there are a lot of now which, bucket you put it in and how you optimize certain places. And so that will likely come. And so we'll be on that part of the journey. But right now we're very much in like embracing it and making sure the adoption is as high as possible.
Yeah. And there's this just wonderful question from, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Liron, on what is a reasonable annual budget for AI for a company with 200 headcount. I'm curious what you think, Steve. I'm happy to start. So I think the way that we think about this is, first, there is no world where in the long run our company should be less profitable as a result of AI. So the way that we try to have our mental model of this is that we have a budget for knowledge work internally. That knowledge budget used to be 100% headcount because there was like nothing else producing knowledge besides people. We view internal AI use cases as within that kind of like knowledge budget. And so I think the first way I would think about it is, there is an experimentation phase. So in some sense, just like you might say, hey, we're going to hire a bunch of new people, there will be some training and there'll be a ramp. Like, I think it's fair to have a ramp budget that's like higher for some period of time. But at the end of the day, you want to see net productivity increases from the group that you have. So that might mean, the business is growing and you're, instead of like hiring a layer of middle management, you might try to see what you can do with AI. But you also might tie those things to particular ROI goals. So for example, in the finance function, there might be a threshold of, we can spend a little bit more, but we need to generate more insights. We need to be better partners for other departments across our org. We need to identify new billing discrepancies that kind of like, self-fund in some way. So at a high level, I would say that's our framework, is we still think about it as like a knowledge budget. And I will also say that, Aleph, like our team is growing a lot. So we don't really, like, I personally don't have to come up with the, like, do we have to do a headcount reduction to like fund this? Like, that is not something we have to do. But trying to delay new hires is something that we do think about.
Yeah, we're not that dissimilar. And the hard part of this question is it is company specific. There's like broad applicability, and same thing. We're people intensive organization. Most companies have a very high knowledge cost, but that's a good. And so when you think about it as what's the long term view of that, I don't disagree with thinking about it differently. The other thing to me is like, well, what if your business relies on AI to produce its cogs? And you're saying, then are you shifting into hey, we might have been a fixed pricing model, and now you might want to think about more consumption pricing. And so what is the right budget? Well, it can scale with your company, and then you want to think about more pricing strategy. And so it's really nuanced to the underlying organization. But I think conceptually, the way you framed it, Craig, is right from like a cost and people perspective when you think about more of like that output productivity. But there could be real use cases that you might have a disproportionate growth in AI for your organization, and you're thinking about how to monetize it commercially when you think about go to market.
Yeah, great point, Steven. Definitely bifurcating the OpEx side of things from the COGS side of things. Yeah, two separate cans of worms and everything that's doing for pricing. It's a great point. But yeah, and I guess just to put a pin on that topic, and then Steven put a question in the chat. Steven Brown, not you. That is I think, when it comes to that sort of like budget for knowledge work and how to think about like a reasonable budget for that. The main caution I would have is don't invent new KPIs that don't tie to the KPIs that have been tried and true for businesses for decades. I wouldn't have a separate OpEx budget and separate, ROI math that doesn't tie back to what does it mean for your operating margins if you're a profitable business or private equity owned. What does it mean for EBITDA or pro forma adjusted EBITDA? If you're a venture-backed business, what does it mean for CAC payback? Like, you still want to tie it back to those kind of like core metrics, because I think even if there's like a temporary move to these like interim metrics, at the end of the day, it's going to keep coming back to where we were.
Yeah, totally agreed. Conceptually, I would say this is hard. As especially you mentioned, high growth company, you want to invest, and so is if this is fueling that, you want to depends how constrained you want to be. But when we go back to that concept of like the knowledge cost space and the long term trade offs, are you willing to overinvest even short term in a budget planning cycle because you feel very confident that this long term is going to rethink your economic profile? At the end of the day, you want to think tried and true in your reporting and the key drivers of the business. But there's a world you might want to lean into this as a high growth oriented company, and it could even further accelerate that. And I would say it's this is the thing we are all navigating on how best to budget. When we budgeted, we have an annual calendar year budget cycle. When we did our tech cost budgeting back in late fall or September, early fall, and where we are today, I didn't expect the pace of this, but it's a good thing. Business is growing, business is accelerating. And so for us, also high growth oriented company. And so we've been able to kind of absorb that. It's really dependent on the organization, but those conceptual frameworks is how I would approach it.
Yeah. And Steven Brown asks a great, related question. How does a high growth company approach budgeting when the world is changing so rapidly? In your opinion, is their traditional annual budgeting cycle going away?
I don't see that. I mean, it's obviously, when you think about that, to me, you want a rolling forecast always. It's like just good practice. And so, if you just set it and forget it, and the business is, largely going to be plus or minus, a couple of percentage points of top line and bottom line, and you don't have to think about it. There's more volatility that can be brought into an organization through this. And so I wouldn't say it's going away, but you may need the pace of refreshes more timely. And so that's just more business specific, but I would have that. But also thinking, as we talked about, this is also impacting long range planning. It's not just like an annual budget cycle. It's what does this mean year 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, and working towards that strategy, and how does it evolve, and keeping short-term decisions, medium-term decisions, long-term decisions kind of in check to make sure at the end of the day, your bottom line and the business is showing operating leverage long term.
Yeah, Steven, I think, high growth is sort of, there's like a lot of vectors of that. I think, my personal opinion is, I think as the org gets larger and more complicated, budgeting is like, it's a messy, complicated process. And it's like hard to expend the time to get everything orchestrated at a high level more than once a year. But then you probably want to like revisit and do more like short form reforecasting. We do it monthly. We use Aleph for that. So I think it's been like a big boon there. But I think quarterly is like a reasonable cadence as well. This is, though, an area where you heard me say, like, there's a lot of orchestration that takes time. I do see opportunities for AI to shorten turns in the budgeting cycle to make the 3-month budgeting process a 2-week budgeting process.
Agreed.
And if that's true, that totally changes this calculus. If I were to look out at the companies that are doing true like annual budgeting exercise on a quarterly basis, today it's a number that rounds to zero. In 12 months, I think it'll probably be 10 to 20%.
I could not agree more. A lot of the things that we say are traditional will, I don't want to say turn on its head, but you will be able to do more leveraging a lot of these processes. And then it's the question of prioritization. How detailed are you looking to get? We do monthly headcount planning. We're meeting with stakeholders, and it's rolling in that planning cycle. When we think about, our OpEx spend outside of tech, like it's not moving that much. It's not like we're magically, even though there's the sprawl of, new software that's coming out, especially with the agentic capabilities, it's not the needle mover for us. And so when you think about what those levers are, excuse me, they're going to be ways of automating and streamlining a lot of the processes where you'll be able to do a lot more efficiently. We're doing a quarterly reforecast process now, but if we had to go theoretically monthly, it's probably very time consuming in all intents. But if that process improves, the question is it worth it? Are you getting better insights doing it monthly versus quarterly? Is the business that volatile that's causing you to need to do it at that pace? That would, to me, would be more the underlying question, versus saying you're doing a monthly forecast because you have the ability to do so. I would just make sure it's a good, at the end of the day, ROI for the team's time.
Yeah. And yeah, it depends. Yeah, I totally agree on how intensive the budgeting process is. Where do you do it? How like, and I think it varies also across tooling as well. So I think this starts to be where like high growth companies are more likely to skew towards there's like a series of Google Sheets with like different levels of like planning that make sense. I think in like that world of like Google Sheets based planning, like take like Aleph as an example. Like we have like 30 to 45 day average sales cycles, and we're growing like 3x plus year over year, which means that we're going to grow theoretically every quarter like 50% quarter over quarter. And I have no idea where that growth is going to come from because our sales cycles aren't long enough to last the quarter. So I think there's like an element of like, it's like that like bell curve like meme of like, I don't know how where the growth is going to come from, but I know that it's going to come. But in some way, it's like more accurate in hindsight than trying to go like so in the weeds there. On the other hand, we are extraordinarily detailed about things like our engineering budget, our marketing budget, these like huge cost centers where they want to make really big decisions about what tooling we're using. We certainly do it on the COG side. And so I think those kind of like higher leverage areas, we spend a lot more time on a lot more frequently.
Yeah, I mean, well said. Also growing organization, outperforming expectations. Some of the top line, whether it's through agentic capabilities or not, you want to be thinking about, not just the bottom, the cost side, but the top line. So when you're seeing that, the thing for us is because we've been in a fortunate position to see accelerated growth better than planned. Now you're talking about where else can we be investing in the organization? How are we thinking about next year? Should we be pulling forward hiring? Are there different product roadmaps that we can accelerate? And so you think about it more, that rolling forecast is actually where we want to keep making the investments to keep up with the demand that we're seeing as well. So totally agree with that.
It's a great question from Aaron, which maybe we can touch on this, and that can pivot into a little bit of where to start tomorrow. We've talked a little bit about what we're seeing on the cost side, where we're seeing leverage, and I think like one of the questions Aaron's asking is there are definitely differences between agents that are fully autonomous and agents that are supporting process automation. Of the ways you're leveraging AI, Steve, and your team is leveraging AI, what percentage of those are just operating autonomously versus what percent is there like at least a human clicking a review and approve button?
Yeah, I would say autonomous. There are things that we're working to streamline. And so it's a lower percentage for like full autonomy. At the end of the day, we have a philosophy that we're operating under, which is despite there's the agentic capabilities, you're still responsible for the output. And so even if you've been able to automate completely autonomously, there's something breaking and someone's not looking. Yes, hopefully there's checks along the way and the agents are doing it. At the end of the day, you're responsible for the output that's being produced. And so pure, like, we are working to move from the initial process automation, asking things, to true autonomous processes. We're very much in that, and that's why I said early innings, and this continues to evolve. We lean more towards like processy improvements, processy automation, shifting towards autonomous as we keep building out and scaling this, but definitely earlier in our cycle.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to this. So at some point, even if you have something that's operating autonomously, it still like reports up to a human at some point, at least in our process. So I would say that like if you go enough layers up the chain internally, I think basically every process has a human in the loop that's like reviewing and approving things. We definitely have subsets of that where, workflows are occurring, an agent is monitoring those workflows and performing actions as those workflows occur. But I still think in pretty much every case, there is like a person doing like the reviewing and approving. I think going back to my kind of like, knowledge analogy of like, you can have knowledge work that comes from people and knowledge work that comes from agents. There is no like agent CEO at some point. And so like every workflow that's being done with AI that we're leveraging internally, it's doing it in a way that does report to a person. And I don't know, I think our trust is like growing, but we still aren't at the world of like many agents or like managing other independent things. And we don't let that chain get too deep, at least yet. Which maybe you are, in which case, Aaron, I want to hear more about how you're doing it too.
Very much so. Craig, how are you seeing the role of governance? And is that becoming top of mind for your organization, given the pace of it, whether it be legal, security, finance? How are you all seeing that, and has your posture or thinking changed over even weeks to months?
Governance in the sense of like data trust,
Yep.
or like agent trust.
Data trust.
So on the data side, I think with like Anthropic and OpenAI, I feel like it's to some extent you're like a little bit beholden to like the whims of the contractual terms that you set with them. So we have enterprise agreements with all of our vendors, both in the production side and in the like internal side. So I think like for us, we're kind of like relying on that in some way. And then, if we want to like connect an MCP or something from one of our systems, there is like a chain of like, not everyone has like the API key to that system, and not anyone can just like connect into those systems. So I'd say on the governance side, we probably skew a little bit more towards like, embrace what's coming and try to reduce barriers for people to try things.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're more accepting of that in like a Anthropic environment than we are in like a Replit environment, or like other environments where like someone could like post an app. Like I think we're like a lot more worried about that than we are, what are people going to do like in the greenhouse.
Yeah. I mean, my view is, finance is going to be a key pillar of really governance when it comes to AI and ensuring what, all the way back to what we started. The production of information should, if not already, be, a table stakes thing. And so then what is the decision making, and making sure that, one, you trust the information you're getting, and then having the judgment to make those informed decisions, and ensuring that, there's obviously the security side, the legal side that's touching upon it. So a lot of that resonates. I know we got a question or a follow up from the prior one from Eric, respectfully disagreeing. on some of the agent work and where agents are going to go, and really pushing constraints for humans. And so I'm curious your view on that, and I can share mine as well.
I just want to hear the example because I'm like very open and like in some way would be excited to like try to implement this. So I'll let you go, Steve, and then yeah, Aaron, I'm this is part of our learning as well. I'm really curious.
Yeah, I likewise. I mean, this is one of those things where all my camera somehow went off. I would love to know the use case, and there are certain things where a human can't get through all that information or a process, and it's actually more efficient for the system, but there still should be human judgment, whether it's QAing certain data sets or a subset of it, reading a report, whatever the output might be. There should still be, in my mind, and I'd love to know, are there examples where there's been an example where the human quote has been wrong or hit that limit, and where you're seeing it. I obviously have my own of like large data and how in the weeds, but I'd love to know if there's something more that you've seen, because it could be helpful for all of us to learn.
Yeah, so I know you're probably like spending some time typing, but whether it's here or even afterwards, I am like super curious and keen to hear more. There's a question that I promise is not a plant from Chen Chen. What will Aleph look like ultimately? Right now, it's more for FP&A. Any other features we can expect in the future? Our focus as a business really is on FP&A, and so for us, like, how does our business model change with AI? I think like first, Aleph is uniquely good at becoming a system of record for budget and actuals living in the same place, where a lot of that budget work got built in a spreadsheet. So I think like we view FP&A tools as not just a combiner of data like what an MCP can do, but it really is its own system of record. And this is a really exciting time for us because as the like Google Sheets, the Excel experiences get better, like Claude for Excel is doing things like making model building and especially model maintaining and kind of like rolling forward much more scalable and much easier in the spreadsheet. As the spreadsheet experience gets better and starts to be more trustworthy at more like a enterprise scale, the Aleph experience actually gets better. So lots of new features in the realm of FP&A. I think we actually like. I think we just our marketing team announced, even though it's been around for a few weeks, our like MCP. So there's like lots of stuff that we're doing on the product side, but really going to be focused in FP&A.
Craig, we got 2 questions in the Q&A tab that I did not see, so that's on me. Is it possible to connect Claude directly to Aleph? And then second, how do we think about Claude for finance and Excel, and will Claude have similar function in the future?
Yeah, so yes, through the MCP, if you open up Claude, you can bring Aleph into Claude. So in my like Claude, and I still use ChatGPT for a few things as well. So within both of those environments, I have, Aleph connected. I also like can connect like Ramp, Stripe, like a lot of these other systems as well. But I can query Aleph directly from there. Through Claude Cowork, which is connected to Slack and to our email. I can, inside Slack call Aleph to do things, but Aleph also has its own context. I'll maybe spend a minute on like Claude for Excel. I'm really excited about Claude for Excel. I think it just has like tremendous potential, and the way I would kind of categorize my lived experience with it is intern level model building. So if you want to build like V1 of like a new model, I think it performs about as well as like my like old GS interns would do. It's sort of like they're very smart, but they like, it's not quite right. But I think it does associate level model review. This to me is like the thing that it is by far the best at, is if you have these like 15 tab, really complicated models, there might be a miscellaneous forgotten hard code and cell like AZ 3044, AI will find it and it'll understand your model and it'll correct it. So I think like it's actually like really good at that. The thing that it doesn't really have so much is because you're interacting with the chat inside of like Excel or inside of Word, inside of PowerPoint, like these are now like all recently released. Um, it's not good at remembering what it told you last time. So because it doesn't have memory that persists across sessions, it has to relearn everything. And so even when you're using Claude for Excel and the MCP to pull in data to build a report, I feel like you've sort of like hired a PhD researcher who has never worked in finance to like build a financial report. And, she'll figure it out and she'll do it very well, but she might take like, 10 minutes to produce the report. Whereas, if you ask like, a tool that's more purpose built for that reason, it might, give you the answer in like 2 seconds because it's like the analyst that's been inside your business and sort of already knows what you're asking.
Yeah, I would say I have a similar view, but I would just say don't view what today is to be the future. This will constantly be evolving and it's going to continuously become better than that intern and be able to upskill. The models are changing rapidly. And so I would just say for all of us is embrace all of it and expect. To me, the expectation should be it's not what we have today. It's going to continuously improve.
So maybe as we kind of like wrap up here, and Aaron, I might try to find you on LinkedIn later because I'm very curious. And maybe we can even do one of these our next webinar we can co-host together. I'd love that. But as we wrap up, Steve, just thinking a little bit about where to start tomorrow. If you're the CFO of 200 to 500 employee business, maybe you have 3 or 4 direct reports, or maybe more, and you want to start leveraging some of the takeaways from this conversation, where would you start?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going really like inning zero, is just start trying to think about little tasks that you're doing that whether it be like improving an email just to get familiar with how to leverage it all the way to, hey, we have this report, we send that every Monday morning. It's from Excel. The team pulls these 3 data sources together and spits it out. Those are like very clean middle of the fairway you'll be able to get done. And then you will continuously then push yourself to think about more complex, whether it's truly building, leveraging a Claude or leveraging an own internal platform to truly automate and get more into that autonomous mindset. It really depends on where you are. But if you're really truly starting at zero, it's just like start with very simple things just to get familiar with, and then you will quickly realize it's riding a bike. You'll have the training wheels on; they'll come off, and then you'll really just keep pushing yourself and your team the art of possible, and then challenge your team to do the same. It's not on you by yourself. It's on them to also challenge the status quo where they can see efficiencies and push the organization and the team forward.
Yeah, I think for us, like the starting at square zero, I think it really is about building a mindset that knows where to look for these like AI driven efficiencies, and it's moving your team from, should we use AI for everything to like starting to identify the low hanging fruit. So I think one thing that can be helpful if you're a remote team, I think it's worth doing it in person. If you're in person, I think it's worth blocking a day with your team to just go through examples together. I think there's just a lot of power in forcing people to, you know, you have a time, you're like in front, like go, make something, go practice something. There's a huge mental hurdle, I think, of that 0 to 1 of like, let me do it and go build it. And there's a little bit of a hurdle of mindset shift of how to look for these things. If you can overcome 1 and 2 of those things, we've at least seen that start to unlock more like everyone is more in like a self-motivated way, making their own lives easier. Um, so with that, Steven, I know we have a couple of minutes, so happy to answer any other questions, but I really want to thank you, Steve, for taking the time to do this and joining us through this. It's been a really wonderful conversation. Really appreciate all the questions that everyone has brought up and all the engagement that we've seen. I think before we close, I definitely want to stay connected with everyone here. And if you have really interesting use cases, I want to learn more. I think part of this is just like staying curious, and I would love to connect with anyone who wants to on LinkedIn and maybe continue the conversation.
I'm not as prepped to share my LinkedIn, and I will get that, but I feel the same. And Craig, thank you. It's been great to do this. And I would say back to that, whether you're starting at step 0 or you're already on your journey, the best way to do it is speaking to others, because every company, every team is approaching this differently, but also the same. And so if you can connect, whether it's a forum like this or a conference or a dinner, speaking to peers, uh, I would challenge the team to do. I would challenge yourself to do. The best thing to do is compare notes and understand what the art of possible is of other organizations and where they've been approaching it. I've learned a tremendous amount over the past several months doing that, and it helps shape my thinking and the team's thinking. And so I would continue to recommend just like speak to others, join these type of sessions, but also just communicate, because the best thing we can do is keep pushing our profession forward.
Amazing. With that, thank you everyone for joining, whether it's your lunch hour or you're somewhere else around the world. Really appreciate it. Look forward to keeping in touch, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.